I want to start with a quote from one of my favourite Nobel Prize winners, the economist Professor James Heckman. Some kids, he said, win the lottery at birth. Far too many don't, and most people have a hard time catching up over the rest of their lives. And he went on to say, early investment in the lives of disadvantaged children will help reduce inequality in both the short and the long run. Don't think anybody would disagree with that in this chamber today. So there is a common understanding about what we're trying to do. And I accept that some of the work that the government has done has been positive. I think the expansion to the 11:40 hours for 3- and 4-year-olds and some 2-year-olds is a good thing. And I think it's made a difference to many young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. I would take some credit for the expansion to the disadvantaged 2-year-olds, which I eventually persuaded Alex Salmond to adopt after considerable and repeated badgering in this Parliament over many, many months. But to get the support for those 2-year-olds from disadvantaged backgrounds is an important part of raising the life chances for this important group. But it is, let me just say this next one, but it is a bit odd today that we've got a debate which is broadly about rhetoric rather than a plan. And I like the rhetoric. I could talk about rhetoric all day. But we do need a plan if we're going to have a meaningful discussion about what's next. Because we've got into some of the detail today. I think the government on family nurse partnerships, a good thing. I think breastfeeding, equally so. I think the steps on minimum unit pricing on alcohol, which I think is dealing with some of the points that Ros McCall was talking about alcohol and drugs, is helpful. But there is big midwife shortages. There is huge CAMHS waits. We've got real problems around the issues that Oliver Mundell was raising with speech and language therapists. But it could have a plan about how we're going to tackle those issues so we could really examine what's going forward. But I want to get some clarity from the Minister today on a really important point that they'll not be surprised to hear me say, which is about the PVI sector. Because we have had promises for a long time, including from the First Minister during the leadership hustings for his party, that he was going to solve this problem. Now, I welcome the £12 an hour, the living wage increase. I think that's a good thing. But the Minister knows that that's not going to solve the problem on its own. The problem is that experienced staff are leaving the PVI sector because they can earn more elsewhere. That's threatening the quality of the education and care provided by these facilities. We may face in future years some really negative Education and Care Inspectorate reports. Now, we need to deal with the problem now so we can avoid that in the future. I want to give you an example. I received a report from Cambusbarron Village Nursery near Stirling, who have been recruiting for a new member of staff. They found that starting salary for early years practitioners in the local council was £16.02 an hour. The government promised to fund £12 per hour starting salaries for the PVI sector, leaving that nursery to fill the gap if they've got a hope of getting anybody to work in that post. £4, a third extra they're expected to cover from God knows where they're going to get the money from, because the money isn't rolling in this sector, but the government somehow is built on a discrimination that means that the nursery worker in Cambusbarron Village Nursery will be expected to provide exactly the same quality service as the worker in the council nursery for all that money less, £4 an hour less. Who's going to do that job? But the government have built that in by design into its funding of the PVI sector. That's got to change. If we're going to have a hope of getting good quality, flexible, private nursery, which is a major part of the government's offer, the government really needs to solve this problem, and ideally very soon and in the next budget. Thank you.
Thank you. And we move